Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the September edition of Molten Music Monthly. Well, it's a crazy one this month because we've had Superbooth. Of course, we talked about Superbooth, I did a live stream about Superbooth, but undoubtedly Superbooth will form much of what we've got to talk about today. But we've also had Knobcon over in the States, which brought a few bits and pieces that didn't make it to Superbooth. And along with that, we've had other stuff just coming out like it normally does at any old time. So there's far too much to fit, even when I stretch out to an hour, which I don't really like to do if I can help it. I like to keep it under an hour. But this month, who knows? Who knows where this is going to take us? So there will undoubtedly be a whole load of stuff that I'm not going to have time to mention. I've tried to pull out the bits that really spoke to me over these last few weeks, and I'll also pack a few short snippets into little sections just scattered around the place, just so that I can mention and touch base with a few more bits and pieces that perhaps I wouldn't have otherwise given space to. So rather than kicking off with my usual cheesy lines of slightly comical headlines, I'm just going to dive straight into a quick roundup of some little juicy nuggets. Sequential have released an update for the Prophet 5, which will turn it into a Prophet 10. It's a voice upgrade, voice cards. You get the stick in the back gives it more voices. On each of those cards is essentially a little Prophet synthesizer, and that's amazing. Now, the reason that they've done this is because they've also upgraded the OS on the Prophet 10 to let you split it into two Prophet 5s and therefore layer or split two sounds together, which is phenomenal, which for me means really the Prophet 5 is essentially dead. That's it. Kaput. It's gone. It's gone because everyone's going to want that, aren't they? You're going to want to have that 5-voice split, aren't you? You're going to want that. So you've finally got a real difference between the Prophet 5 and Prophet 10, other than just how many notes you can play. And that's extraordinary. And unfortunately, the upgrade from the Prophet 5 to the Prophet 10 is probably more than buying the Prophet 10 by itself. So that's not as if you've now got a sneaky way of getting to a Prophet 10 via a Prophet 5, if you're with me. But anyway, fantastic. The Prophet 10 will continue. It's just slightly sad, I think, that the Prophet 5 is essentially going to be no more, because if you have a Prophet 5, you're gonna get the upgrade, aren't you? At some point, I would have thought. One of the things we saw at Superbooth was the Udo Super 6 desktop version. Super 6 is a binaural 12-voice analog-esque kind of digital modeled, some kind of synthesizer. It looks a bit like a Juno, has all that kind of Juno-inspired interface with the sliders and the buttons and bits and pieces. Fantastic. It's a beautiful synthesizer, and they've now revealed a desktop version. Great. Super. Great. Meanwhile, ASM have released two new versions of the Hydrasynth. Hydrasynth wavetable synthesizer, very, very popular, lots of modulation and stuff going on. There's an Explorer version, which makes it smaller keyboard, but still with that classic polyphonic aftertouch that they really excel at. So you have all of the same features, just with a scaled down interface, lost a few knobs, made it simpler, but otherwise same engine inside. Then there's a deluxe version, which pumps it out to a much bigger keyboard, a proper player's keyboard, you could say, and it also doubles the polyphony, I think, and stuff like that. But essentially, it's the same synthesizer, just in a bigger version and a smaller version. The smaller version also run on batteries, which is rather nice. Moog goes for 3 tiers. I knew they would. In fact, I've got 3 tiers over here. You can see at the background. I did a rather nice video, I thought, on their sound studio system with the two things. I had a DFAM and a Mother 32, and it seemed completely obvious that they would at some point release a 3-tier version, which has the subharmonicon, the DFAM and the Mother 32 all in one beautifully presented 3-tier system, along with the wonderful preamp mixer thing, the bits of artwork, the robot, and fantastic patch diagrams, and some kind of card game to help you patch between all 3 modules. Fantastic, brilliant idea, absolutely nailed it. Good job. And slightly on a sadder note, ROLI, the people who brought us the Seaboard squishy MPE controllers, have gone bust. Which is a shame. They always seem to me to be an extraordinarily out there company. They didn't behave like a niche company does usually in our marketplace. You know, people who make stuff and then sell stuff. They seem to be massively into loads and loads of investment. Give us millions of dollars and we'll make these amazing things that everyone will buy. But we're in this extremely niche market. So it just seemed an odd way to behave, and the result of that is that they've run out of money. And don't have anything to show for it. So there we go, ROLI are gone. However, the Seaboard is apparently going to continue to exist under a new company. So they've sort of shedded all the debt, started a new company, got a load more investment, again in that weird investment way they do, and are going to continue with the light up keyboard thing, the educational keyboard thing, and hopefully bring the Seaboard back in the future, which is good because it's an awesome controller. I can't comprehend exactly how that kind of company functions, how you do this whole thing with millions of investment and then go bust. Can't you make something and then charge the right amount for it? Isn't that how it's supposed to be? I don't know. But that's our quick roundup of just some little updates. So let's get on to the meat of it. Silhouette. This is a strange prototyping kind of synthesizer which uses light and visuals in order to generate waveforms which you can then use to make music. It seems to be along the lines of you have like a light box or camera projector thing, you put something underneath it, those lines are then interpreted through some form of algorithm and turned into waveforms. Interesting. Very, very interesting. This is put together by some madman called Johannes Prizigoda, or could be also known as Pit. Let's go with that. And it seems to be based on a bit of a Mac Mini, which is running this system. It's got a keyboard in front of it. It has this sort of large screen up the front, which uses, very interestingly, a kind of transparent selection of knobs which sit on the screen, and then the screen behind it changes to reflect exactly what you're editing. And the other side of the screen then throws up the image of what it is that you're currently using as your basis of synthesis, and you can change and use little bits of that and just sort of take out a corner. You can use wavy lines to generate this and a picture of the Mona Lisa to generate the other. It's sort of weird and strange, but also engaging and interesting and fascinating. It's more like a science experiment than it is a serious music making tool. However, it's something which they've been continuing to prototype over many years, and we saw it a couple of years ago with a couple of joysticks wanging things about, whereas now it seems to be a bit more sedate, a bit more serious. Really like that changing background interface. I think that's a really interesting idea. But I think you just probably need to go and visit the website and sit there watching the videos for a bit going, what is it doing exactly, in order to get any kind of flavour as what it's about. But it certainly stuck out to me at the beginning of this month as something fascinating, interesting and worthwhile checking out. Waldorf teased us a little bit with this synthesizer before Superbooth. It's called M. That's about it. Not very descriptive, I know. But they showed us this red knob in the teaser videos, and I was convinced it was going to be the Waldorf filter, the dipole filter, which was a fantastic machine, a desktop filter. All it did was like filter the crap out of stuff. And it was a fantastic device. It used to be up in the back room at Turnkey where I used to work, and we used to destroy monitor speakers with it and generally mess stuff about. And I thought it might be the return of that, but no, it's a return. Is it the return, the reinvention of, the re-pulling together of all their old microwave synthesizers? Got all the stuff out of that, stuffed it into one box so that you can enjoy the sound and the extraordinariness of those wavetables that you found within the microwave synthesizers. It's quite a thing. What interests me about it is how plain it is. By which I mean it's not packed full of modulation. If you look at any wavetable synth at the moment, it's all about moving it about the place. Nothing stays still. You've got to morph from one, morph into this, go over there, move this about and jiggle that around. That seems to be what wavetables are all about these days. Whereas kind of the inventors of the wavetable, Waldorf, come along with their M, and it's just packed full of great sounding wavetables in the first instance. So yeah, you can morph from one to the other, but it's not a wave state, it's not a mod wave, it's not a Hydrasynth or an Argon 8, you know, which are packed full of LFOs and envelopes and sequencers and all sorts of bits and pieces. It's just living this pure life of gorgeous, icy wavetables, and it's moving through that. It does have an analog filter section, which is fantastic. It's going to give it that bit of growl that you need, but otherwise you've got all these very, very pure and lovely wavetable sounds as the basis of the synthesis that you build from there. Retrokits RK-008. Interesting box, looks like a calculator. Yeah, we know. It's based on the Alesis MMT8, which is a MIDI recorder. Rather than being a sequencer as such, it's a MIDI recorder, which is a little bit different. Differences being that you're not really programming it. With a sequencer, you program. You put notes in, you tell it where to go, you tell it how big they are, how long they are. Put all those in onto steps, usually, or onto some kind of piano roll, and then you play it back. With this style of sequencer recorder, you play in it, and it plays it back. And then you play in over the top, and it plays it back. And you build up things that way. It's a much more performance-led, interactive recorder. And of course, as it's MIDI, you can change the sounds that it's going to be using, and you can add modulation over the top and automation lanes and all that kind of stuff. In fact, it has 8 tracks, but each track supports 16 MIDI channels simultaneously. So you could have a whole load of stuff going on each track if you wanted. It's a very simple interface. You hit record, you hit the thing, you play it, it loops round, you then select another one, add more to it. It's that beautiful simplicity which keeps you performing as opposed to mousing about trying to program something, trying to come up with something. You just play it in, man, and it loops round, and then you change stuff together to make songs. So it has very much a hardware synthesizer, hardware modular feel about it, while just dealing purely with MIDI. Reminds me a bit about the Bastille MIDI looper, actually, as well. Similar idea, I think. But this, very neatly done by Retrokits, beautiful little looking thing, and it has a lot more depth in there than the Alesis ever had. The ZOIA Euroburo. Now this was at Knobcon, wasn't it, Superbooth? This is the Empress Effects ZOIA, which is this remarkably weird pedal with this matrix of light up buttons on it, which has now been taken and squished into a Eurorack module. You've got the same interface, but instead of stomp box on-off pedals, you've got a couple of buttons and some CV in and out. What is it? Well, it's another one of these modular environments within a module. So it's packed full of effects and routing, but also modular sources and synthesizers. It's like the Hector from PolyEffects that we saw recently. It's an entire modular world within a box. So you've got modular within modular. Is that what we want? Is it a place where we can design fantastic effects? Yeah, probably. And are they going to be useful within a modular context? Yes, absolutely. But it depends on how you want to work, because the interface is unique, potentially. I don't really know. I mean, I've watched videos of Cuckoo playing with this thing, and I'm still going, I don't really know what is he. There's lots of pushing of buttons, which I'm not so sure about. But it is a very colourful interface, so I'm sure it has the potential there to be very engaging. I just haven't quite wrapped my head around it yet. But it's very interesting to see it available as a Eurorack module. Deadbox had a new synthesizer out called the Nymphes. The Nymphs with an E and an S on the end. It's a beautiful looking synthesizer. It's a 6-voice analog synthesizer and a nice little desktop thing, sliders, simplicity. I like the way that it just generates. It's not trying to bother you with acres and acres of knobs and buttons and sliders. It's just going, here's 6 voices of loveliness and all the bits that you want to play with. The filter, the waveforms, the envelope, the LFO, all patching in and patching out. It's also got digital effects built in, coming this time from Deadbox, as well as some Sine Vibe stuff as well, I believe, like the Typhon. But all of it wrapped up together in a nice little desktop box. I'm really enjoying this kind of simplistic approach to polyphonic synthesizers. I think that in some ways we've almost gone out all the way as far as you could possibly go on total control of everything. And actually we find that keeping things a bit simple is no bad thing. No bad thing at all. It also has some interesting playing modes where you can play it as a 6-voice synth, or you can wire in chords and have it remember a whole bank of chords that you can swap between by single triggers. It has unison modes and detune modes. Lots of just interesting, nice ideas in here that are not going to be too taxing, but just simply produce an enjoyable playing experience. The Nymphs also attracted a bit of controversy because at the bottom of the press release and also in the marketing, Deadbox added this little statement to say that the Nymphs is dedicated to all abused and oppressed women everywhere, and that we should smash the patriarchy, and that through music, perhaps souls and hurts and pain and horror in this world can be soothed. And that's an awesome sentiment in my view. Now, a lot of people don't think that. They think synthesizers are rubbish at doing anything. They should be emotionless, they should not affect us, and they should just make beepy noises, and we should stop talking about anything other than just the beepy noises. And I think that's a shame. That's a missed opportunity. That's not what music feels like to me. Music is invigorating. The creation of music, the playing with waveforms, just fills me up spiritually and emotionally. And so absolutely, I thoroughly believe that music can change the world. Absolutely it can, if we want it to. But it's really up to us in how we handle things. And I think perhaps it would be good to extend a little bit of grace to people like Demetra of Deadbox, who put this thing together, with the hope that this will be inspirational and inspire people to become better human beings, because that's a decent pursuit, even if you're making synthesizers. Even if a single note just trebles your heart that tiny little bit towards becoming a better, less horrible person, then that's a great thing in my book. Out of Knobcon came a slightly strange synthesizer from Michigan Soundworks called the MSW 810. It's based on some obscure Roland module I've never heard of, never come across, never heard in all my life. But there you go. We're scrapping around trying to find any old bits of rubbish to re-emulate and reinvigorate these days. This is one of those. It's a monosynthesizer done in that lovely sliders that Roland likes. So you've got plenty of control over mixing and waveforms, sources all blended together, filters. You know, it's all right there, straight on the front panel. People argue that it's a bit like an MC202 or an SH9. I have no comment to make, other than it's a bit of a bass-liney kind of thing, I think, and they've even built in a TB303 style sequencer just to sort of round it off. The cool thing about it is that it's only going to be available as a kit, so you could build yourself essentially some kind of a little bit like a 303 for $300. That sounds like an interesting project to me. Possibly the biggest product of the show was the Perkons from Retrokits. It's an extraordinary looking desktop drum synthesizer machine. It's a hybrid machine using digital waveforms and digital synthesis and then stuffing that through analog filters and effects. You've got 4 channels of stuff. So you see the 4 lanes. You've essentially got 4 channels of sequencing, drum sequencing, and those relate to 4 of the 5 panels on the top. The 5th panel is the effects panel. So you've got 4 identical modules, if you like, which are running the waveform and the synthesis, and then with sends to route to the effects. But of course, it's having those 4 channels of sequencing out there on the front panel that is particularly attractive. So you can start interweaving stuff and changing things about, and then get very much hands-on with how it's sounding as you go. It's got lots of interesting things going on in there, which I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of yet. It's one of those funny situations where there wasn't really a demo of it going around. There's just lots of pictures and people going, oh yeah, look at this, it's great. But it took a while for anyone to actually film anything going on, and I think it's still only scratching the surface. I mean, there are 3 different sound modes to each of those sections. There's 8 controls apparently over different parameters. There's an analog BBD delay in there. There's all sorts of velocity triggering and stuff going on for integration of other external gear. You've got ratcheting and probability, you've got performance controls, all sorts of stuff going on in this thing. It looks great. It's a good solid thing, a fantastic colour, very un-Erica like, and I reckon it's going to be a massive hit. I mean, and that and like a Pulsar 23 next to each other, that's got to be a winner, hasn't it? I think so. Now, drums were a little bit of a feature, I think, this year, and so I've pulled together a bunch of different modules, and I'm going to sort of talk about them all at once, kind of. So what am I talking about? Well, we had the Rabbit Elephant Portal Drum, we had the WMD Kraken, we had the Facile Vega, we had the VPM E Quad Drum Expander, we had the Plankton ZAPs, and we had the TubeTech LPZW 606 cloney thing. I think she'll come back to in a minute. But there's a lot of diversity around percussion and how you do that in Eurorack. On one hand, you've got huge modules which focus on attaining a single sound. On the other hand, you've got modules which can produce multiple sounds. You know, what's best? What do we really want? What do we need? I mean, I was quite taken with the Kraken from WMD because it has this physical modelled snare sound, and it really was coming up with this fantastic snare. And snares, as we all know, getting that snare right is a bane of sound engineering. But to have something within Eurorack which you can tailor the bong and the sizzle and the snap on it, it just seemed very focused on getting this awesome sound out of itself. Although you could also feel that, well, couldn't I just use a sample? Because do I really need that change? I mean, that becomes a bit of a theme, because you take that idea of individually tweaking something, then take it to the Portal Drum from Rabbit Elephant, and this thing is like a complex oscillator for creating a kick drum, and just a kick drum. I mean, there's no end of controls on this thing. There's no end of nuance of shifting and bringing and modulating and sharing and combining these waveforms and adjusting and tweaking just to get a dum, you know. And it feels, you know, on one hand I'm looking at this Kraken going, oh yeah, that's brilliant, and then we're looking at this kick drum going, oh, isn't it just too much? Isn't there a point at which you go over the edge into this is ridiculous? And also the Rabbit Elephant one is really, really expensive, I think, for a single module producing a single sound. But if you do want the nuance, you want the ever-changing, you want it to be your kick drum, then that's definitely it. I mean, one thing they talked about, which I thought was interesting, was that how does it sit in a mix? Because you use any module to create a kick drum modular, something which is kicking out that sound, and it just does its thing. And one of the things we're not very good at in modular is the mixing in order to produce something which fits together well. We just like, a stereo output, it's all just happening and it's going off and it's a once in a lifetime experience. Yeah, that's fine, but once we start to try to produce music using these tools, then being able to mix something properly within the context of other instruments becomes more important, and I think that's what the focus of that is, because you have a lot of control over exactly where that energy is. Is the energy right on the front or is it further back? How does that affect where it sits in a mix? Yeah, interesting. So, you know, there are allowances for having masses of controls because you're trying to do something really quite clever and difficult. Which brings us to ZAPs by Plankton, which I still haven't entirely wrapped my head around, I don't think. But I think it's sort of a percussion synthesizer where it's run on a sequence from Winter Modular that runs through these different things. But you're only talking about sort of a single sound, but it's changing for each step. So it feels like it's step modulation on a particular sound. So you get this range or this loop going of these percussive changing sounds. But I need to look at that a little bit deeper before I really know what I'm talking about. But that seems to be it. But again, it's a lot of focus, a lot of module in producing a single sound, albeit one that's changing. But yeah, interesting. Something I've been recommended to look at a lot is the quad drum from VPME, which is a nicely colourful, perhaps slightly too big for me, but well laid out module that offers 4 different drum sounds from samples and such like loaded off a card and waveforms, and each one can be tuned individually and set up individually and then played. There's an expander for it called the QEX, which gives it more CV control, more audio output, so you can treat these things a bit more individually. It's a great thing because it's simple. It just gives you a bunch of sounds that you can tweak and change the decay of and modulate a little bit and pitch about the place. You can trigger them all individually, and now you've got individual outputs for them. It's great. It's a good little system, I think, that doesn't like to make things too complex, and that definitely appeals to me. A similar idea comes from the Vega. Now, I didn't see anyone cover this at Superbooth, so I don't actually know whether they were there or not. But this is a much smaller, compact, brightly coloured module that puts in 4 digital percussive systems that you can address individually. So 4 channels of drums, each with its own digital synthesizer behind the scenes. Has a little bit of colour coding and sort of a little bit of depth to the menus behind the system in order to keep it a compact thing, which is, you know, love it and hate it kind of thing, but it looks like it's a really good and compact solution for getting 4 different drum sounds or percussive sounds into your rack. I'd like to spend a little bit more time with that, I think. But the one that wins it, I think, for me, is from Tubatech and LPZW, which is what they're calling it, a 6M0D6 6mod 6, could be 6 mod 6. Let's call it that. It's essentially a 606, so a Roland TR606, the sound engine from that, taken out of that old grey box and stuck into a Eurorack module, but at the same time they've pulled out all of the parameters so you can actually change them. The 606 was, I suppose, almost famous for having no control whatsoever. You just had the sounds, really, whereas this is bringing out the envelope, the pitch, other parameters, you know, snap, decay, tone, envelopes, you know, all that good stuff that you want in a relatively compact 6 channel, 5 channel. How many channels is it? Well, there's 7 sounds, I think, over 5 channels, but it's a 606 or something. Oh, anyway, I don't know, whole bunch of drums. So an entire kit, really, and you've got noise and sizzle and stuff and kicks, and you've got hi-hats, you've got congas, you've got all the sorts of drum sounds that you might need, plus the ability to absolutely change them out of all recognition. I think that's working really nicely. Tubatech also do a little sequencer which you can get in 1U and 3U, which is perfect for it. Absolute match made in heaven. Put those two things together. That could be a fantastic drum and percussion solution, I think, for Eurorack. Compact, a lot of stuff in your HP, lots of different sounds, mix output, things like that are just good and simple with hands-on control. What more could you want? Coming out of Knobcon, another one that didn't quite make it to Superbooth is the Modbap Osiris. This is a wavetable synthesizer, and it has something about it, a vibe about it, which just seems to be really quite sort of premium and posh. They call it, well, they spend a lot of time calling it a bi-fidelity module, which I think has confused us all, because what are you talking about? You just mean it's high quality, yeah? Is that really what you mean? It's twice the sample rate of other things which have half the sample rate? I don't know. I think that's a weird marketing decision to call it a bi-fidelity wavetable oscillator, because everyone's going to ask, well, what does that mean? That's the first question you get. Might as well just call it a wavetable oscillator, and then people will understand what it means. Anyway, it looks brilliant. It's packed full of wavetables, and the idea is that it morphs between different sounds in a wonderfully magic way that no one's ever thought of before, in both terms of waveform and also phase. So, like with all wavetable oscillators, it's modulation that we want to do. We want to move it. We're not that interested in hearing something completely straight. We want it to be moving into something else and from something else. And the Osiris definitely offers that. Meaning the demos that I've seen, it just sounds beautiful. But it has some great algorithms built in. It can run in a unison mode. There's wave folding going on. There's all sorts of shaping and tonal interesting things going on. It has an inbuilt VCA and envelope, turning it into an entire voice. And in fact, they're selling a little tiny modular case for it to essentially make it a standalone desktop wavetable oscillator, which is a nice idea. Simple way of adding something beautiful to a smaller setup. Really nice. The Buchla Music Easel. Now this made its way from Knobcon to Superbooth in the hands of Mark Doty, and he was able to demonstrate it to everyone the world over. What is it? Well, it's a briefcase. It's a briefcase synthesizer. The Buchla Music Easel is a classic thing. It's classic in its blue, red and white, I suppose, and its banana nuts in its banana cables, in its Buchla bubbly West Coast, slightly druggy, weirdy, outy kind of modular synthesis that you can build an entire symphony in. somehow. You see people play these things and nothing else, and it sounds extraordinary. It's not like having, I don't know, a little synth that you play. It just seems to generate an FFS and pour out of itself somehow. It's like whenever you stick electrons into a Buchla device, they just align themselves in a particular vibey, groovy way, and then they do a bit of a conga out the other end. It's an emotive and fascinating instrument. When it becomes an instrument, it's not just playing with electronics or modular, it really is some kind of instrument that you're playing. And you can tell that I've never had a go because I'm just babbling. But I'm babbling in a way that makes me just want to enter into that world fully knowing that I would fail at it completely, because I just don't have the brain to really accommodate that kind of majesty. Anyway, so what's it all about? Well, Buchla have recently upgraded the control center part, the 208 part of the music easel, to become the 208C. And that has brought with it various enhancements and changes and betterments and improvements, and so they thought it would be good to cram that into a new music easel. While they're at it, they build a new briefcase, which looks like the sort of briefcase you'd carry onto an aeroplane in 1977 to blow it up. You know, it's a classic businessman's briefcase, I think. and within it is a very sleek looking music easel. They have also changed the keyboard. The keyboard used to come in sort of two layers where the white keys and the black keys were actually separate things, whereas now it's an entire touch plate on a single piece that makes it much simpler and much less prone to fail. They've also built in some space over on the left side. One of those spaces they're filled with this I/O module, which seems to have everything you can imagine packed into it, full of utilities, full of USB and MIDI and strangeness, and it has this weird window that you can put other modules in, which allows you to save patches. It's bizarre and interesting, and it's really interesting hearing Mark talk about it, because he talks as if you understand the language. And it's like, what? So somebody asked him, that's spare space, what should you put in there? So, well, obviously you'd put in like a 293 or a 268 or something, and then and you'd be off and running. And it's like, what are they? What do they do? Tell us more about these strangely numbered modules. So yeah, it's a whole world, is the Buchla easel, and it's fascinates me, and one day perhaps I'll get to have a go. Which brings us nicely to this next thing, which does suggest that perhaps Buchla is something I could have a go at, because Tiptop Audio and Buchla have got together to create the 200 series of Eurorack Buchla modules. Now, Buchla was sort of already doing this with Catalyst Audio a while ago. I've spoken about it before, I think, and that's where the red panel range came from, is with the guy from Catalyst Audio working with Buchla to produce Eurorack versions of classic Buchla stuff. Well, now Buchla have gone on, and Catalyst Audio has actually re-emerged and is now doing their own Buchla modules. So evidently they felt they wanted to do something separate, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. And Buchla have gone to Tiptop Audio, who are a fantastic modular maker who have been around a good while now and seem to be a brilliant fit. At least the result is a range of beautiful looking Buchla modules for Eurorack. Now, there's still a little bit of discussion as to whether they are obeying all the Eurorack rules or whether they're obeying the Buchla rules. I'm not entirely sure yet. Maybe you can tell me in the comments so we can get a final word on it. But whether it's 1 volt per octave or 1.4 volts per octave or what, it gets confusing because Buchla uses slightly different rules, and how Eurorack has it become. But the question is important because I'm not sure whether you can take one of these modules and just stick it into any old rack and enjoy it, or whether you really need to have the entire Buchla 200 series experience and have all of those modules together in a single system by itself. It seems to make sense that way, but also because this is Eurorack, we like stuffing any old rubbish together, and so I'd like the opportunity to do that too. Unsure at this point, but I'm sure these things will become clear over time. But one of the things that Tiptop is awesome at is its stackable cables. It does stackable Eurorack cables, which I don't think anybody else really does, which allows you to plug in a Eurorack cable that's got a socket on the back. You can plug another one in and it instantly becomes a Molt all by itself. And that's something that Buchla do with their banana cables all the time. It's a classic Buchla thing. And so that being now part of the Eurorack Tiptop experience is really interesting. It's a good fit. I'm looking forward to getting my fingers in some of that Buchla goodness. How are we doing? Am I going fast enough to fit all this in yet? Well, here's another one for you. Error Instruments, my favourite maker of bits of old crap. And I mean that in the most lovely way possible. This is the Loopman Eurorack. What is it? Get a cassette tape, stick it in a Walkman, break the edge off the Walkman, stick it into your Eurorack. That's the idea. So it's a working Walkman, cassette Walkman, stuck into Eurorack. They originally did a little desktop module, which was fun, I like that. But now you've got this thing sticking out the front of your rack. Just fantastic. Is it fantastic? I think it's fantastic. You may not do. It depends. I mean, cassette is seeing a little bit of a comeback these days because we love that lo-fi, creaky quality of analog cassette tape. Do we? I think we do. Perhaps we do. So the idea of this is that it's a Walkman, it's stuck on the front, you stick a cassette in it, and you can speed it up and return it back. And you can plug CV in to either start it, stop it, or gate it, on and off, that kind of thing. So using one of the included, I think, 5-second tape loops, stick that on and you can have it going round in a loop, and you can just record 5 seconds of something and have it go round and then record over the top. Interesting. It's a tape loop. It's like the T-Rex tape delay, but in a slightly crappier pink form. That's using a 10 quid Walkman they got from Argos. It's just brilliant. I love it. Absolutely love it. It's more expensive than I thought it would be. It's something in the 350 sort of euro department, which makes it not an impulse buy for me. Makes me think, if it had been 100 euros, maybe under 200 euros, I would have gone, yeah, wow, I'm having one of those. That's going to be a great laugh. 350 euros is less of a great laugh area and more of a serious purchase area. And I'm not quite sure how serious a cassette loop stuck into your modular, how serious that can be. Fantastic. What a load of fun. I can't wait to get hold of half a dozen of those tape loops and use different ones at different times. It's even got a radio built in for whatever reason that's for. Well, I mean, they suggested that you use the radio and you tune into a bit of static and then you can use that as a percussion generator. Yeah, that works. Or just random noises coming into your Eurorack like you would with the music thing, radio music. Yeah, totally. I can get that. But messing around with tape loops, that is the thing. That's the thing at the moment. I'd quite like to get into that. We saw a whole new synthesizer from a whole new company called the Malevolent. Malevolent from Pulse Width Modulation, PWM, I think. Why has no one had that company name before? It's a British-made synthesizer which is designed to be kind of nasty, is the idea. Gritty, edgy, falling aparty kind of way. It comes in a mini-synth sort of format with lots of controls on the front panel, but also lots of patching points scattered all over the place. So it's a sort of synth that would integrate nicely with any other sort of bits of hardware that you have, while spitting out its own crunchy, edgy analog sound. It's got 2 oscillators with shaping. It's got FM between the two. You've got LFOs and filters, a 2-pole filter that you can crunch everything through. And then apparently there's 19 patch points, having just looked it up, as well as an arpeggiator and a joystick for a little bit of performance control. It sounds great. The demo is excellent. I really enjoy the effort that they put into that, into creating a whole soundscape with a synthesizer that can show off its versatility. But it looks like the sort of thing that can sit nicely on your desktop and really feed in and feed off lots of other bits and pieces. The Yuhi Wiretap was there, apparently. It did exist a couple of years ago at the last Superbooth, but it was only really there as a piece of paper with a few ideas on it. Whereas this time around it was actually physically there, although it's still quite difficult to really grasp it from the demos that I've seen so far, and I'd really like to get to the bottom of it, because I think it's potentially fascinating. As I understand it, you can plump in 1 or 2 melodies, and from that it will drag out all sorts of rhythms that you can patch into your system to create percussion. It's like a melody to rhythm converter, and I'm fascinated by the idea of that. I like the idea of triggering different things. I like the idea of having percussion which is following the melody that I'm making, rather than having to program something complementary to it. I have something that's being generated in response to the melody I'm already making. See, that's interesting. You could also see it as something that creates simple envelopes from other melodies, as well as gates and triggering other musical events. Interesting. I just need to see it. I feel like I need to see it properly demonstrated, down to the finest details, so I can really grasp what on earth it is about. The Haken Audio EaganMatrix. What the heck is this about? This is mind-boggling, this is. Now, the EaganMatrix is the sound engine that comes in the Haken Audio Continuum. The Continuum is a big slab of red, sort of fuzzy stuff that you can use as an expressive MPE controller, I suppose. You use it for playing extraordinary expressive instruments with extraordinary expressive fingers through this thing. And that sound engine covers all sorts of different forms of synthesis. You've got physical modelling in there, you've got samples, you've got wavetables. I think every sort of synthesis is represented within the EaganMatrix. It has a software editor which looks impossibly complicated and deep, where, I don't know, you can mesh these things together. So you have this matrix of modulation moving from pressure and aftertouch and velocity, moving into different parameters and how they all work. And you're able to express yourself beautifully through this entire interface. You take that engine, stick it into a Eurorack module that's devoid of any expression whatsoever. What do you do with that? I don't know. I don't know what you do with that entirely. I mean, the demos that I saw showed you putting sort of a touch plate type expression into it so that you could control some of the parameters. Because you have a whole bunch of CV inputs and outputs to control the sorts of things that you would have done expressively on a keyboard. What I don't quite understand yet is how that relates to Eurorack. I mean, I guess you're using your Eurorack facilities, your sequences, your modulations, your LFOs. You're using that to affect how this instrument sounds. So rather than that stemming from the playing of your fingers, rather than that performance coming from some kind of manual input, you are trying to automate that performance through your Eurorack, through the triggering of things, through the manipulation and stepping of modulations, through that kind of generative stuff is going to be fed into this matrix within the synthesizer, and that's going to produce some kind of pleasing outcome. At least that's the theory. How that actually works in practice, I don't know. I don't really know. But wow, expensive and interesting and fascinating, and probably one for those, for those people who know what they're doing, I suspect. The Godfather. Now this is an interesting thing, and I predicted it. Yes, I did. I said when I had the Moog Sound Studio, the 2 one, I suggested at the time that for a third tier, what would be brilliant would be for Moog to put together a Mooga Fuga inspired 60 HP effects module, which fits exactly with that Moog system. And they didn't listen to me, of course, and instead we have the Godfather. Now the Godfather is from Enjoy Electronics, an Italian firm, I believe, and it gives you 4 channels of effects processing within your Eurorack or your desktop. I mean, it's designed to fit with that Moog 60 HP system, so it'd sit above a DFAM or a Mother 32, and it would look gorgeous. It does. It fits in there gorgeously. But within these 4 channels, you've got reverbs, delays, different multi-effects, compression, sidechaining, I think, all sorts of other goodness going on to allow you to process signals. So stick a load of stuff in it. You've got sends and knobs and ways of controlling all of that stuff through both knobs on the front panel and also through a screen, which gives you information on what the heck and all is going on and how these things relate to each other. Lots of patch points, lots of modulation. It's great. It's quite exciting. It's exactly the sort of thing I think you need. I mean, I'm all for having a rack, particularly, of effects that I can use in all sorts of different places, and this sets it up as like a 4-channel mixer, as like a 4 channel strips alongside each other to provide the basis on which you do all this processing of your audio. Very, very interesting. What a great box. Moving away from Superbooth now into other things that have also happened in the world, we have the Bespoke Synth. This is a massive modular DAW. It can be anything, and it's free. And where did this come from? Big blank void page into which you throw a whole bunch of modules that look like maths equations or spreadsheets which are then threaded together through dangly patch cables and creating this entire modular experience. It can have everything in it, anything you like, really. So you can build synthesizers, but you can also build sequencers, you can build effects, you can build audio recording, I think, and sampling and all sorts of stuff. It's phenomenal. It's free, and everyone should go and try it out. I mean, it's a bit baffling, but it looks interesting. It's sort of fascinating and wireframe, and it's full of numbers and data and lines of stuff. You know, all of the patch cables pump with the data that they've got from one thing to another, which is brilliant in of itself. I love the visualization of that. But I mean, what is going on? How do you use it effectively? It's a whole other question. It's a sort of place, I mean, it's like VCV Rack to a degree, it's like Audulus, it's like Reactor. It's one of these places that you can lose yourself in for days, trying to work out, how do you make a noise? How do I make a noise in this? And how do I modulate that noise? It's fascinating, and you should all go and have a go. Another thing that's fascinating is Usine Hollyhock version 5 from Brain Modular. It's nuts, this place. It's another sort of modular environment where you piece together and patch together your DAW experience to be exactly what you want it to be. I've had my eye on this for many years because of its touch ability, its ability to be very, very touch friendly on something like the Surface Pro. But I've never quite gotten into it. It's always been, it's just too baffling, and I'm not entirely sure, I don't know if I've got the time right now to really crack what this is about. But now it's down to version 5 and it's just looking superb. It's modular again. It's a digital audio workstation, and you can record audio, you can sequence in it, you can multi-track within it, but also you can bounce things around, you can bounce parameters, you can modulate stuff from here, there and everywhere. You can design it to work pretty much exactly however you want within the realms of computing and physics and music and interaction and modulation and synthesis. You know, it's a crazy place. Crazy place. Looks beautiful, works in whatever way you could want it to. Reco Synth had another go at the Mutuca. Now, it's a bit of a shame because Mutuca in Portuguese means horsefly, and horseflies are just like the worst thing in the world ever. However, in Portuguese, Mutuca, it sounds alright. We'll go with that. So it's a Mutuca FM. Now, on the surface, you look at that and you go, right, so it's an FM synth. Oh, how interesting. Right, how many operators? No, it's not at all. It's an analog synthesizer. It's the Mutuca, which was a single oscillator analog synthesizer, handcrafted, beautifully made in this sort of console mini compact sense with this button keyboard and just beautifulness about it. It's taken that idea and they've added another oscillator. So it's now a 2 VCO synthesizer, analog synthesizer, and the FM bit is the fact that you have frequency modulation between the oscillators. So you can cram VCO2 into VCO1 to create crazy frequency modulated synthesis and sounds in an analog style. We're not trying to do ratios, we're not talking about operators or carriers and modulators. We just stuff in audio rate, stuff it from one thing into another to create awesome range of tones and versatile possibilities within the context of a dual oscillator monosynth. It's fantastic. Of course, you don't have to do it like that. You can just run the two oscillators together and have them detuned so they go all gooey or just offset. You create sort of 2-note things going on, and you just play with the filters in the envelope and modulate those into. It's just a beautiful, beautifully realised little monosynth with 2 oscillators in this beautiful case. It's beautiful stylings with this lovely button little keyboard at the bottom, and you can just have fun enjoying the simplicity of analog synthesis with FM modulation going between things. Beautiful. I love this stuff. So that's the Mutuca FM from Reco Synths. Fabulous. Almost last, we have the Signal State. Now, Signal State is a game. It's a game. It's not a piece of hardware. It's a computer game for PC and Mac. Costs about 15 quid. What it is, right? It's a post-apocalyptic future where all the machines have died. Nobody knows why. They're just not working anymore. and you find yourself catapulted into an abandoned farm that's full of machinery and power generators and lights and stuff that doesn't work. And you're given a toolbox, and you're told, off you go and fix stuff, because we can fix it if we can rewire it and re-engineer it. And so we do, and the way we do that is with a modular synthesizer. So you get out your Eurorack, just a row or two of Eurorack, stick that down, start patching things together, and things start working. It's just totally brilliant. So essentially it's a puzzle game. So each puzzle says you've got a couple of sources, these waveforms, and we want this outcome. If you can achieve this outcome from these two things, then the circuit will work and the machine will work, and we can start the farm moving and the generators, and we can start feeding ourselves. That's the idea, so that we won't starve. So there is like a death element involved in this, and that we're all going to die if you don't patch this properly. So you're given a couple of simple modules like a sum and a VCA and an attenuverter, and you're asked to do impossible feats of logic to get these signals into this thing over here. You go, what? I'm supposed to do what? How do I do that? So this whole business of needing lots of VCAs actually starts to become a reality, because you discover that you don't know anything about modular synthesis. You have no clue how to change one signal into another, how to sum them, or how to logically gate them together in order to make some outcome happen after something else. And very, very quickly your brain's going, oh my goodness, that's how that works. Oh yeah, that's how you do that. That's how voltage works. I'm just messing about with here. I'm just going VCO into filter and just moving it a little bit. Whereas now I'm starting to open my mind to the idea of all sorts of logical, mathematical possibilities within the realms of Eurorack. It's fascinating. It's hard. It's hard when you haven't been thinking in a logical state in how you patch things together. But it's totally enlightening. And I'm learning tons just by playing with it. I'm going to try to do a bit of a live stream playthrough tonight, which is going to be too late for your purposes with this video, but maybe look that up to see how well or badly I'm actually able to do any of this stuff. But it looks beautiful. I mean, the story, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I mean, you're having these conversations with this woman and this engineer and this other person and this, that, and the other, and they're sort of giving you more modules and giving you more clues into what to do and how to put it forward. But ultimately, they're just feeding you these puzzles which you solve by patching stuff together. And it's modules. It's not like some sort of fake sci-fi version of a module. You're not trying to defuse a bomb. You are literally trying to take a couple of signals and convert them and change them and modulate them into some other signals using existing familiar modular synthesizer modules. Fantastic. The Signal State. Go and check it out. And finally, the Surface Pro 8 is upon us. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, hallelujah. Thank goodness for that. And isn't that awesome? Everybody says. Yes, no, it is awesome. Surface and software and sort of interaction with these sorts of devices is something that I do, is something that I'm interested in, is something that thrills me to some degree. And whenever I'm using music software, I tend to be using it through a Surface into other things. And the Surface has been, since the Surface Pro 3 I've been using a Surface. It's been a fantastic platform for creative endeavours. It's not perfect. It has its limitations because it's not designed for high CPU crunching. It's designed for leisure and business and farting around and media and bits and pieces. And it works brilliantly as a laptop hybrid tablet thing. I use it every day. As that, in a business sense, in a writing article sense, in a surfing the net and watching movies type of sense. Beautiful perfection, I would say, for that kind of behaviour. For music production, slightly more difficult, but it's still a fascinating platform for it. When using things like digital pens, using touch, the fact it's very, very mobile, it's very quiet, it's small, it fits into all sorts of places. It's just a brilliant thing to fit into a larger desktop thing. So you're not having to carry a great big lugging laptop with you or a desktop computer. But getting it to work has been quite an adventure. But that's something that every time a new one comes out, I grab hold of it and I run it through tests and I make it work, damn it. So that's what I'm going to do with the Surface Pro 8. Is there anything different, I hear you say? Yes. This is a big change, actually. The first one being is that it's going to have Thunderbolt ports, 2 Thunderbolt ports or USB-C, but if it's Thunderbolt, then potentially I could be running a Thunderbolt audio interface with it, like a Claret that I happen to have over there that I haven't used for many years, since the last time I had Thunderbolt. So that could be very, very interesting. Otherwise, you know, USB-C, that's cool as well. I've got other things that can use that. So it's going to be interesting to see how well the low latency works. Is it going to be crackle free? Are we going to need to tweak the thing to high heaven? Which brings me to the next thing. It will come with Windows 11. I have no clue as whether that's any good or not. My assumption is Windows 11 is just built on Windows 10, and so hopefully it will bring all the goodness of Windows 10 with it, so it won't be a faff. But probably it will be, so there might be some tweaking involved. I don't know. It comes with a new pen, which is a flat one, which sits sort of in the nape of the keyboard, like it is with the Surface Pro X. So I've taken that idea and built that in so it's always charged and is not going to fall off the side like this one does all the time. So interesting, slightly larger screen. I've also opted for the 16 gig version of RAM because my usual choice, which is the i5 8 gig, is actually the bottom of the range now. So I thought I'd better just move up one slot. So I've gone for an i5 16 gigabytes that I've purchased myself. I don't get given them by Microsoft. And that should be here at the end of October. And I will endeavour to get stuck in to see how well it goes. It gives me an opportunity, first of all, to show the Surface Pro as a platform. Does it work and can it work? And so other users can hopefully benefit from my experience, because it is a gorgeous device, undoubtedly. And the other thing is it encourages me to use a bit more software, so I can do some videos on that. And you might find that interesting, because we do live in a hybrid world, whether we like it or not. You might be all hardware, I can cater for that. You might be all software. I do videos on that too, and I like the way the two interact. So, you know, I just like to do a bit of everything. So that will be coming at the end of October, and I look forward to putting it through its paces. Right, that's it. That'll do. That's enough. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Thanks for stopping by. That's plenty. I missed out loads. I appreciate that. Thank you, Cockerel. Awesome that you're back and giving us some of your tones. Lots of stuff coming up next week. In fact, this weekend, hopefully, if I've released this video in time, we have the Modular Day, or 2 Modular Days, in Barcelona, in Spain. Bufacco are hosting a couple of days of modular craziness with all sorts of people going to be there. I'm going to be there doing a little bit of co-hosting, I think, or commentating or something. And it's Friday and Saturday night this week, so that's the 1st and 2nd of October. So do go and check that out. Should be a fun evening or two. Otherwise, I don't know, I've got a load of videos coming up. But I think I've had enough. I've got to go and cook our tea and get on with my life. So I hope that's been helpful. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.